Book 5. Grummet.
The bursts to the moon and to the planets are also not historic events. They are the major evolutionary breakthroughs. Today, when we speak of immortality and of going to another world, we no longer mean these in a theological or metaphysical sense. People are now striving for physical immortality. People are now traveling to other worlds. Transcendence is no longer a metaphysical concept. It has become reality. F.M. Esfandiari, Upwingers.
The 10th Trip, or Malkuth. Farewell to planet Earth.
Ye have locked yourselves up in cages of fear, and behold, do ye now complain that ye lack freedom? Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, K.S.C. Epistle to the Paranoids. The Honest Book of Truth.
As the earth turned on its axis, and dawn reached city after city, hamlet after hamlet, farm after farm, mountain and valley after mountain and valley, it became obvious that May 1st would be bright and sunny almost everywhere. In Athens, a classical scholar waking in the small cell where certain Platonic opinions had landed him felt a burst of unexpected hope and greeted Helios with rolling syllables from Sappho crying through the bars, "Brodadactylos Eos!" Birds, startled by the shout, took off from the jail yard below, filling the air with the flapping of their wings. The guards came and told him to shut up. He answered them gaily with "Polyplois bois thalassis." You've taken everything else away from me, but you can't take old Homer away. In Paris, the communists under the red banner and the anarchists under the black were preparing for the annual International Labor Solidarity Day, at which the usual factionalism and sectarianism would once again demonstrate the absolute lack of international labor solidarity. And in London, Berlin, 1,000 cities, the red and the black would wave, and the tongues of their partisans would wag, and the age-old longing for a classless society would once again manifest itself. While in the same cities, an older name and an older purpose for that day would be commemorated in convent after convent and school after school, where verses, far older than the name of Christianity, were sung to the Mother of God. Queen of the Angels, Queen of the May. In the United States, alas, the usual celebrations of National Law Day had to be canceled since the rioting was not quite ended yet. But everywhere, in Asia and Africa, as in Europe and the Americas, the members of the oldest religion were returning from their festivals, murmuring "Blessed be" as they parted, secure in their knowledge that the Mother of God was indeed still alive and had visited them at midnight, whether they knew her as Diane, Dan, Tan, Tana, Shakti, or even Urzuli. Queen of the Angels, Queen of the May. In Nairobi, Nkrumah Fubar picked up his mail from a friend employed at the post office. To his delight, American Express had relented and corrected their error, crediting him with his February 2nd payment at last. This was, to his thinking, big magic, since the notification had been mailed from New York even before he began his geodesic spiels against the president of American Express on April 25th. Obviously, such retroactive witchcraft was worthy of further investigation, and the key was the synergetic geometry of the Fuller tetrahedron, in which he had kept his mannequin during the spellcasting. Over breakfast, before leaving for the university, he opened Fuller's No More Second-Hand God, and again grappled with the arcane mathematics and metaphysics of omnidirectional halo. Finishing breakfast, he closed the book, shut his eyes, and tried to visualize the Fuller universe. The image formed, and to his amazement and amusement, it was identical with certain symbols an old Kikuyu witch doctor had once drawn when explaining the doctrine of fan-shaped destiny to him. As the book closed in Kenya, the drums of the Orabi stopped abruptly. It was 1 a.m. there, and the visiting anthropologist, Indul Ring, immediately asked how the dancers knew the ceremony was finished.
"The danger is past,"
an old Hopi told him patiently.
"Can't you feel the difference in the air?"
Saul, Barney, and Markov Cheney were racing toward Las Vegas in the rented Brontosaurus, while Dillinger was leisurely driving back toward Los Angeles. In Honolulu, as the clock struck 9 the previous evening, Buckminster Fuller, trotting between airplanes, suddenly caught a glimpse of a new geodesic structure fully incorporating omnidirectional halo. And after a 4-hour flight eastward, landing in Tokyo at the same time he left Honolulu, he had a detailed sketch finished. It looked somewhat fan-shaped, as the no smoking fasten seatbelt sign flashed. It was 4 a.m. in Los Angeles, and Dillinger, safely home, he thought, heard the gunfire dying out in the distance. The president must already be withdrawing the National Guard, at least in part, he thought. The phone by Rebecca's bed rang just then, 8 o'clock New York time, and she answered it to hear Molly Muldoon shout excitedly,
"Saul and Barney are on TV! Turn it on! They've saved the country!"
In Las Vegas, Barney blinked under the TV lights and stared woodenly into the camera, while Saul kept his eyes on the interviewer and spoke in his kindly family doctor persona.
Would you tell our viewers, Inspector Goodman, how you happen to be looking in Lehman Caves for the missing man?
The interviewer had the professional tone of all TV newscasters. His intonation wouldn't have changed if he'd been asking, "And why did you find our sponsor's product more satisfactory?" Or, "How did you feel when you learned you had brain cancer?"
Psychology,
Saul pronounced gravely.
The suspect was a procurer. That's a definite psychological type. Just as a safecracker, a bank robber, a child molester, and a policeman are definite types. I tried to think and feel like a procurer. Now, what would such a man do with the whole government looking for him? Attempt to escape to Mexico or somewhere else? Never. That's a bank robber reaction. Procurers are not people who take risks or make bold moves against the odds. What would a procurer do? He would look for a hole to hide in.
The FBI crime lab definitely confirms the man Inspector Goodman found is the missing plague carrier, Carmel.
The interviewer threw in. He had orders to repeat this every 2 minutes.
Tell me, Inspector, why wouldn't such a man hide in, say, an empty house or a secluded cabin in the mountains?
He wouldn't travel far,
Saul explained.
He'd be too paranoid, seeing police officers everywhere he went. And his imagination would vastly exaggerate the actual power of the government. There is only one law enforcement agent to each 400 citizens in this country, but he would imagine the proportion reversed. The most secluded cabin would be too nerve-wracking for him. He'd imagine hordes of National Guardsmen and law officers of all sorts searching every square foot of woods in America. He really would. Procurers are very ordinary men compared to hardened criminals. They think like ordinary people in most ways. The ordinary man and woman never commits a crime because they have the same exaggerated idea of our omnipotence.
Saul's tone was neutral, descriptive, but in New York, Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. This was the new Saul talking, the one who was no longer on the side of law and order.
So you just asked yourself, where's a good-sized hole near Las Vegas?
That was all there was to it, yes.
The American people will certainly be grateful to you. And how did it happen that you got involved in this case? You're with the New York Police Department, aren't you?
How will he answer that one?
Rebecca wondered. Just then the phone rang. Turning down the TV sound, she lifted the phone and said,
Yes.
I can tell by your voice you're the kind of woman who fully meets the criteria of my value system,
said August Personage.
I want to lick your ass and your pussy and have you piss on me and...
Well, that's a most amazing story, Inspector Goodman,
the interviewer was saying.
Oh, hell,
Rebecca thought. Saul's expression was so sincere that she knew he had just told one of the most outrageous lies of his life. The phone rang again. With a pounce, Rebecca grabbed it and shouted,
Listen, you creep. If you keep calling me...
That's no way to talk to a man who just saved the world,
Saul's voice said mildly.
Saul, but you're on television.
They videotaped that a half hour ago. I'm at the Las Vegas airport about to take a jet to Washington. I'm having a conference with the president.
My God, what are you going to tell him?
As much,
Saul pronounced,
as an asshole like him can understand.
In Los Angeles, Dr. Vulcan Troll watched the seismograph move upward toward grade 2. That still wasn't serious, but he scratched a note to the graduate student who would soon be replacing him.
If this jumps to 3, call me at my house.
Then he drove home, passing Dillinger's bungalow, humming happily, thankful that the rioting was ending and the guard was being withdrawn. At the lab, the graduate student, reading a paperback titled Carnal Orgy, didn't notice when the graph jumped past 3 and hit 4. Danny Price-Fixer, waking in Ingolstadt, glanced at his wristwatch. Noon.
My God,
He thought. Sleeping so late was a major sin in his system of morality. Then he remembered a little of last night and smiled contentedly, turning in the bed to kiss Lady Velcour's neck. A huge black arm hung over the other shoulder, and a black hand, limp in sleep, held her breast.
My God!
Danny said out loud, remembering more, as Clark Kent sat up groggily and stared at him. Smiling Jim Treponema, at that moment, was navigating a very dangerous pass in the mountains of Northern California. Strapped to his back was a 6mm Remington Model 700 bolt-action rifle with 6-power Bushnell telescope. A canteen of whiskey was hooked to one side of his belt, and a canteen of water to the other. He was perspiring from labor, in spite of the altitude, but he was one of the few happy people in the country, since he had been nowhere near a radio for 3 days and had missed the whole terror connected with anthrax, leprosy, pie plague, the declaration of martial law, and the riotings and bombings. He was on his yearly vacation, free from the sewer of smut in which he was submerged 49 weeks of the year, the foulness and filth in which he heroically struggled daily, risking his soul for the good of his fellow citizens. And he was breathing clean air and thinking clean thoughts. Specifically, as an avid hunter, he had read that only one American eagle still survived, and he was determined to be immortalized in hunting literature as the man who killed it. He knew well, of course, how ecologists and conservationists would regard that achievement, but their opinions didn't bother him. A bunch of fags, commies, and smutnuts. That was his estimate of those bleeding heart types. Probably smoked dope, too. Not a man's man among them. He shifted his rifle, which was pressing his sweat-soaked shirt uncomfortably, and climbed onward and upward. Mama Sutra stared at the central tarot card in the Tree of Life. It was the Fool.
Pardon me,
The little Italian tree said.
This is getting ridiculous.
Fission Chips muttered.
I don't intend to spend the rest of my life in conversation with trees.
I am a tree worth talking to.
The dark-skinned tree with her hair in a bun persisted. He squinted.
I know what you are.
He said finally.
Half tree and half woman, ergo a dryad. Benefit of classical education.
Very good.
Said the dryad.
But when you stop dripping, you're going to crash. You'll remember London and your job, and you'll wonder how you're going to explain the last month to them.
Somebody stole a month from me.
Chips agreed pleasantly.
A cynical old swine named the Dalai Lama, or another fella named Toad. Bad lot. Shouldn't go around stealing months.
The tree handed him an envelope.
Try not to lose that,
She said.
It'll make everybody in your office so happy that they'll accept any story you make up to explain how it took you a month to get it.
What is it?
The name of every bugger agent in the British government, together with the false names they use for the bank accounts where they keep all the money they can't account for. And the account numbers and the names of the banks, too. In one nice package. All it needs is a red ribbon.
I think my leg is being pulled again,
Said Chips, but he was coming down, and he opened the envelope and peered at the contents.
This is real.
He asked.
They won't be able to account for the money.
The tree assured him.
Some very interesting confessions will be obtained.
Who the devil are you?
Chips asked, seeing a teenage Italian girl and not a tree.
I'm your holy guardian angel,
She said.
You look like an angel,
Chips admitted grudgingly.
but I don't believe any of this. Time travel, talking trees, giant toads, none of it. Somebody slipped me a drug.
Yes, somebody slipped you a drug. But I'm your holy guardian angel, and I'm slipping you this envelope, and it'll make everything all right back in London. All you have to do is make up a halfway reasonable lie.
I was held prisoner in a bugger dungeon with a beautiful Eurasian love slave.
Chips began improvising.
Very good,
She said.
They won't believe it, but they'll think you believe it. That's good enough.
Who are you, really?
But the tree only repeated,
Don't lose that envelope.
and walked away, turning into an Italian teenager again, and then into a gigantic woman carrying a golden apple. Hauptmann, chief of field operations for the Federal Republic of Germany's police, looked around the Führer suite in disgust. He had arrived from Bonn and headed straight for the Donau Hotel, determined to make some sense of the scandals, tragedies, and mysteries of the previous night. The first suspect he grilled was Freiherr Hagbard AA, sinister jet-set millionaire who had come to the rock festival with a large entourage. Chalene and Hauptmann talked quietly in one corner of the suite of the Donau Hotel, while the cameras of police photographers clicked away behind them. Hauptmann was tall and thin, with close-cropped silver-gray hair, long vulpine features, and piercing eyes.
Dreadful tragedy, the death of your president last night,
he said.
My condolences. Also for the unhappy state of affairs in your country.
Actually, Hauptmann was delighted to see the United States of America falling into chaos. He had been 15 at the end of World War II, had been called to the colors as the Allies advanced on German soil, and had seen his country overrun by American troops. All of this made a deeper and more lasting impression on him than the U.S.-West German cooperation that developed later.
Not my president, not my country,
said Hagbard quickly.
I was born in Norway. I lived in the U.S. for quite some time and did become a citizen for a while when I was much younger than I am now. But I renounced my American citizenship years ago.
I see,
said Hauptmann, trying unsuccessfully to conceal his distaste for Hagbard's indistinct sense of national identity.
And what country today has the honor of claiming you as a citizen?
Smiling, Hagbard reached for the inside pocket of the brass-button navy-blue yachtsman blazer he had worn for the occasion. He handed his passport to Hauptmann, who took it and grunted with surprise.
Equatorial Guinea?
He looked up, frowning.
Fernando Poo?
Quite so,
said Hagbard, a white-toothed grin breaking through his dark features.
I will accept your expression of sympathy for the sad state of affairs in that country.
Hauptmann's dislike of this Latin plutocrat grew deeper. The man was undoubtedly one of those unprincipled international adventurers who carried citizenship the way many freighters carried Panamanian registry. Chilene's wealth was probably equal to or greater than the total wealth of Equatorial Guinea, yet it was likely that he had done nothing for his adopted country other than bribe a few officials to obtain the citizenship. Equatorial Guinea had split asunder, nearly plunging the world into a third and final war. And yet here was this parasitical Mediterranean fop, driving to a rock festival in a Bugatti Royale, with a host of drones, yes-men, flunkies, minions, whores, dope fiends, and all-around social liabilities. Disgusting. Hagbard looked around.
This room is a pretty foul place to have a conversation. How can you stand that smell? It's nauseating me.
Pleased to be causing some discomfort to this man, whom he disliked more and more as he got to know him, Hauptmann settled back in the red armchair, his teeth bared in a smile.
You will forgive me, Freiherr Chalene. I find it necessary to be here at this time, and also necessary to talk to you. However, I would have thought this peculiar odor of fish would not be unpleasant to you. Perhaps your nautical dress has led me astray.
Hagbard shrugged.
I am a seaman of sorts, but just because a man likes the sea doesn't mean he wants to sit next to a ton of dead mackerel. What do you think it is, anyway?
I have no idea. I was hoping you could identify it for me.
Just dead fish, that's all it smells like to me. I'm afraid you may be expecting more from me all around than I can possibly provide. I suppose you think I can tell you a lot about last night. Just what are you trying to find out?
First of all, I want to find out what actually happened. What we have, I think, is a case of drug abuse on a colossal scale. And we, the Western world in general, have had too many of those in recent years. Apparently, there is not a single person who was present at this festival who did not partake of some of this soft drink dosed with LSD.
Treat every man to his dessert, and none should escape tripping,
said Hagbard.
I beg your pardon?
I was parodying Shakespeare,
said Hagbard.
But it's not very relevant. Please go on.
Well, so far no one has been able to give me a coherent or plausible account of the evening's events,
said Hauptmann.
There have been at least 27 deaths that I'm fairly sure of. There has been massive abuse of LSD. There are numerous accounts of pistol, rifle, and machine gun fire somewhere on the shore of the lake. A number of witnesses say they saw many men in Nazi uniforms running around in the woods. If that wasn't a hallucination, dressing as a Nazi is a serious crime in the Federal Republic of Germany. So far, we have managed to keep much of this out of the papers by holding the press people who came here incommunicado. But we will have to determine precisely what crimes were committed and who committed them. And we must prosecute them vigorously. Otherwise, we will appear to the whole world as a nation incapable of dealing with the wholesale corruption of youth within our borders.
All nations are wholesale corrupters of youth,
said Hagbard.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Hauptmann grunted, seeing in his mind's eye a vision of drug-crazed masqueraders in Nazi uniforms, and himself in a German army uniform over 30 years ago at the age of 15, and understanding very well what Hagbard meant.
I have my job to do,
he said sullenly.
See how much more pleasant the world is now that the Saures are gone.
The Dalai Lama flashed into his brain. Hagbard kept a poker face. Hauptmann went on.
Your own role in the incident seems to have been a constructive one, Freiherr Cellin. You are described as going to the stage when the hysteria and the hallucinating had reached some sort of climax and making a speech which greatly calmed the audience.
Hagbard laughed.
I have no idea at all what I said. You know what I thought? I thought I was Moses, and that they were the Israelites, and I was leading them across the Red Sea while the Pharaoh's army, intent on slaughtering them, pursued.
The only Israelites present last night seem to have fared rather badly. You're not Jewish yourself, are you, Freiherr Cellin?
I'm not religious at all. Why do you ask?
I thought that then, perhaps, you could shed some light on the scene we find here in these rooms. Well, no matter for the moment. It is interesting that you thought you led them across the lake. In fact, this morning, when the police reserves entered the area, they found most of the young people wandering around on the shore of the lake opposite the festival.
Well, perhaps we all marched around it while we thought we were going across it,
said Hagbard.
By the way, didn't you have any men at the festival at all? If you did, they should be able to tell you something.
We had a few plainclothes agents there, and they could tell me nothing. All but one had unknowingly taken the LSD, and the one who didn't must have been hallucinating too, from some kind of psychological contagion. He saw the Nazis, a glowing woman 100 feet tall, a bridge across the lake. Sheer garbage. As you doubtless noticed, there were no uniformed police there. Arrangements were made and sanctioned at the highest level of government to leave policing at the festival to its management. It was felt that, given the attitudes of youth today, official police would not be effective in handling the huge crowd. I might say, in my own opinion, I consider that a cowardly decision. But I'm not a politician, thank God. As a result of that decision, order keeping at the festival was ultimately in the hands of people like yourself who happened to be inspired to do something about the situation, and were themselves hampered as involuntary victims of LSD.
Well,
said Hagbard,
in order to fully understand what happened, you have to realize that many people there probably welcomed an acid trip. Many must have brought their own acid and taken it. I, personally, have had a great deal of experience with LSD. A man of my wide-ranging interests, you understand, feels obligated to try everything once. I was taking acid back when it was still legal everywhere in the world.
Of course,
said Hauptmann sourly. Hagbard looked around the room and said,
Have you considered the possibility that these men, old as they are, might have unknowingly imbibed LSD and suffered heart failure or some such thing?
There were 23 dead men in the suite. 13 were in the large parlor where Hagbard and Hauptmann were sitting. The dead men, too, were seated in various attitudes of total collapse, some with their heads lolling back, others bent forward at the waist, heads hanging between their knees, knuckles resting on the floor. There were 9 more old men in the bedroom, and 1 in the bathroom. Most of them were white-haired, several were completely bald. Not one could have been under 80 years of age, and several appeared to be over 90. The man in the bathroom had been caught by death in the embarrassing position of sitting on the toilet with his pants down. This was the old gentleman with the white mustache and the unruly forelock who had spoken harshly to George in the lobby the night before last. Hauptmann shook his head.
I'm afraid it will be no easy task to find out what happened to these men. They all seem to have died at about the same moment. There are no observable traces of poison, no signs of struggle or pain, except for the expression around the eyes. All of their eyes are open, and they appear to be looking at some unguessable horror.
Do you have any idea who they are? Why did you say I might have been able to help if I were Jewish?
We have found their passports. They are all Israeli citizens. That in itself is quite odd. Generally, Jews that old do not care to come to this country for obvious reasons. However, there was an organization connected with the Zionist movement founded here in Ingolstadt on May 1st, 1776. These elders of Zion might have assembled here to celebrate the anniversary.
Oh, yes,
said Hagbard.
The Illuminati of Bavaria, wasn't it? I remember hearing about them when we first arrived here.
The organization was founded by an unforked Jesuit, and its membership consisted of Freemasons, freethinkers, and Jews. There were also some famous names in politics and the arts. King Leopold, Goethe, Beethoven.
And this organization was behind the Zionist movement, you say?
Hauptmann brushed away the suggestion with long, slender fingers.
I did not say they were behind anything. There are always those who think that every political or criminal phenomenon must have something behind it. There is always a conspiracy that explains everything. That is unscientific. If you wish to understand events, you must analyze the masses of the people and the economic, cultural, and social conditions in which they live. Zionism was a logical development out of the situation of the Jews during the last 100 years. One need not imagine some group of illuminated ones thinking it up and promulgating the movement for devious reasons of their own. The Jews were in a wretched condition in many places. They needed somewhere to go. A child could have seen that Palestine was an attractive possibility.
Well,
said Hagbard,
if the Illuminati have no importance in the history of Israel, what are these 23 old Israelis doing here on the day of the organization's founding?
Perhaps they thought the Illuminati were important. Perhaps they themselves were members. I shall make inquiries to Israel about their identities. Relatives will probably claim the bodies. Otherwise, the German government will see that they are buried in Ingolstadt Jewish Cemetery with proper rabbinical ceremonies. The government is very solicitous of Jewish persons nowadays.
Maybe they were freethinkers,
said Hagbard.
Maybe they wouldn't like being buried with religious ceremonies.
The question is wearisome and unimportant,
said Hauptmann.
We shall consult the Israeli government and do as it suggests.
An elderly waiter knocked and was admitted by one of Hauptmann's men. He pushed a serving cart bearing a magnificent silver coffee urn, cups, and a tray full of pastries. Before serving anyone else, he rolled the cart across the thick carpet to Hauptmann and Hagbard. His rheumy eyes studiously avoided the bodies scattered around the suite. He poured out coffee for both men.
Lots of cream and sugar,
said Hagbard.
Black for me,
said Hauptmann, picking up a pastry with cherry filling and biting into it with relish.
How do you know somebody hasn't dosed the coffee or the pastry with LSD?
Said Hagbard, smiling mischievously. Hauptmann brushed his hand over his hair and smiled back.
Because I would put this hotel out of business if I were served food tainted in any way, and they know it. They will take the utmost precautions.
Now that we're being a little more sociable and drinking coffee together,
said Hagbard,
let me ask you a favor. Turn me loose today. I have interests to look after in the U.S., and I'd like to be leaving.
You were originally planning to stay for the entire week. Now, suddenly, you have to leave at once. I don't understand.
I was planning to stay, but that was before most of the U.S. government got wiped out. Also, since the remainder of the festival is being called off, there's no reason to stay. I'm still not clear on that, however. Why is the festival being called off? Whose idea is it, and what are the reasons?
Hauptmann stared down his long nose at Hagbard and took another bite of the pastry, while Hagbard wondered how the man could eat in the midst of this awful smell. He could understand how a detective would not be bothered by the presence of the dead, but the fishy smell was something else again.
To begin with, Freiherr Chalin, there is the disappearance and a possible death by drowning of 4 members of the Saure family, known as the American Medical Association. Accounts of what happened to them are garbled, fantastic, and contradictory, as are those of every other incident that occurred last night. As I reconstructed, they drove their car straight into the lake.
From which side?
Hauptmann shrugged.
It hardly matters. The lake is virtually bottomless. If they're in there, I doubt that we will ever find them. They must have been under the influence of LSD, and they certainly weren't used to it.
He looked accusingly at Hagbard.
They were so clean-cut. Absolutely the hope of the future. And the car was a national relic, a great loss.
Were they the only well-known casualties?
Who can say? We have no accurate record of who was attending the festival. No list was kept of those who bought tickets, as should have been done. 1,000 young men and women could have drowned themselves in that lake, and we wouldn't know about it. In any case, the Saures, as you may not know, were the moving spirits behind the Ingolstadt festival. Very patriotic. They wished to do something to promote tourism to Germany, particularly of Bavaria, since they were native Bavarians.
Yes,
said Hagbard.
I read that Ingolstadt was their hometown.
Hauptmann shook his head.
Their press agent gave that out when the festival was conceived. Actually, they were born in northern Bavaria, in Wolfram's Eschenbach. It is the birthplace of another famous German musician, the Menzinger Wolfram von Eschenbach, who wrote Parzival. Well, now they are gone, barring a miracle, and no one else seems to be in charge. Without them, the festival is simply collapsing like a headless body. Furthermore, the government wants the festival shut down because we don't want a repetition of last night. LSD is still illegal in West Germany, unlike the U.S.
There are parts of the U.S. where it's still illegal,
said Hagbard.
It's not illegal in Equatorial Guinea because we've just never had a drug problem there.
Since you are an enthusiastic citizen of Equatorial Guinea, I am sure that delights you,
said Hauptmann.
Well, Freiherr Chalin, I would like to release you immediately. But when I've pieced together more of last night's events, I shall have more questions for you. I must ask you to stay in the Ingolstadt area.
Hagbard stood up.
If you'll agree not to have me tailed or guarded, I'll give you my word that I'll stick around.
Hauptmann smiled thinly.
Your word won't be necessary. Every road is blocked. No planes are permitted to take off or land at Ingolstadt Aerodrome. You can have the run of the town, the lake, and the festival area, and you will not be disturbed.
Hagbard left at the same time the old waiter did. The waiter bowed Hagbard out the door, and when it closed behind him, said,
A great shame.
Well,
said Hagbard,
They were all in their 80s. That's a good age to die.
The waiter laughed.
I am 75, and I do not think any age is a good age to die. But that is not what I was referring to. Perhaps mine hair did not notice the fish tank in the room. It was broken, and the fish were spilled all the floor. I have taken care of that tank for over 20 years. It was a fine collection of rare tropical fish, even Egyptian mouth breeders. Now they are all dead. So it goes.
Hagbard wanted to ask the waiter what an Egyptian mouth breeder was, but the old man suddenly nodded, pushed open a doorway to a service room, and disappeared. Danny Price Fixer was wandering around in the dark with Lady Velcor and Clark Kent, feeling absolutely wonderful, when Miss Portnari intercepted him.
This will interest you,
she said, handing him an envelope similar to the one she had handed Fish and Chips.
What is it?
He asked, seeing her as a Greek woman in classic robes holding a golden apple.
Take a look.
He opened the envelope and found a picture of Tobias Knight and Zev Hirsch in the middle of the confrontation office, setting the timer on the bomb.
This man,
she said, pointing to Knight,
is willing to turn state's evidence against both Hirsch and Atlanta Hope. You've wanted to nab them for a long time, haven't you?
Who are you?
Danny asked, staring.
I am the one Mama Sutra told you of, the one appointed to contact you here in Ingolstadt. I am of the Illuminated.
What are those two talking about?
Clark Kent asked Lady Velcor.
Who knows?
She shrugged.
They're both tripping. God's lightning is the most active front in America today for the cult of the yellow sign.
Miss Portnari went on, telling the mark the tale. A few feet away, Joe Malik said to Hagbard,
I don't like frame-ups. Even for people like Hirsch and Hope.
You suspect us of unethical behavior?
Hagbard asked innocently. Pat Walsh is dialing a phone.
I don't believe in jails,
Joe said bluntly.
I don't think Atlanta and Zev will be any better when they get out. They'll be worse.
You can be sure the Illuminati will protect you,
Miss Portnari concluded gravely. Danny Price Fixer continued to stare at her.
The phone is ringing far away, dragging me back to a body, a self, a purpose, shattering my memories of being the ringmaster. I sit up and lift the receiver. Hirsch, I say.
My name is Pat Walsh,
a woman's voice says.
I speak for Atlanta herself. The password is the lime.
Go ahead, I say hoarsely, wondering if it's about that peacenik professor we killed at UN Plaza on April 1st.
You're being framed for a bombing,
she said.
You have to go into hiding.
Hagbard laughed.
Atlanta isn't returning to the States. She's been a double agent for over 2 years, working for me.
I found the warehouse door the Walsh woman described. It was open, as she had promised, and I wondered about the name on it, Gold and Appel Transfers.
So is Tobias Knight, and he'll cop a plea. It's all been carefully planned, Joe. You only thought bombing your own office was your idea.
How about Zev Hirsch?
Joe asked.
He's having some very educational experiences about this time in New York City.
Hagbard replied.
I don't believe in jails either.
And I am trapped. The three of them surround me, and Jubella demands, "Tell us the word." Jubello repeats, "Tell us the word." And Jubellum unsheaths the sword. "Tell us the word, Zev Hirsch."
A bombing in New York?
The president asked shrewdly, trying to look as tough as his predecessor.
Yes.
Saul went on.
As soon as the link with God's lightning was clear to us, Bonnie and I took off for Las Vegas. Well, you can understand why.
The president didn't understand any of this, but wasn't about to admit that.
Are you headed for Las Vegas?
He asked shrewdly, trying to look as tough as his predecessor.
Yes,
Saul said sincerely.
As soon as we found out about anthrax, leprosy, pie, and Dr. Mocenigo's death, we realized the same organization must be implicated. God's lightning...
God's lightning?
The president asked shrewdly, remembering earlier years when he had been a guest speaker at their rallies.
And the secret group that has infiltrated them and taken them over, the cult of the yellow sign. We have reason to believe that an English intelligence agent named Chips will be arriving in London in a few hours, with evidence against most of the yellow sign operatives within their government. You see, sir, this is an international conspiracy.
An international conspiracy?
The president asked shrewdly. And in Central Park, our old friend Perry hops from tree to ground, snatches a nut thrown by august personage, and quickly runs around the tree 3 times in case this friend, possibly enemy, produces a gun and starts blasting.
While far above the highest mountains in California, another aspect of my consciousness soars like winged poetry, and knows, somehow, more about what is coming than Dr. Troll's seismograph. For I am the last, truly the last. The ecologists are right. Mine is not merely an endangered, but nearly an extinct species, and my senses have been sharpened beyond instinct by these last years. I circle around, I circle around, I soar, I bank, I float. I am... Rare moment for me, not thinking about fish, for my belly is full at present. I circle around, thinking only about the soaring, the freedom, and more vaguely about the bad vibes coming up from below. Must you have a name? Call me Holly One, then. Haliaitis leucocephalus the last. Symbol once of imperial Rome and now of imperial America, of which I neither know nor care, for all I know is the freedom of my estate, and about that the Romans and the Americans have never had aught but the most confused and distorted ideas. Wearing my long green feathers, I circle around. I am Holly One, and I scream! Not with rage or with fear or with anger. I scream with ecstasy. The terrible joy of my very existence. And the scream echoes from mountain to another mountain, resonating onward and onward, a sound that only another of my species could understand. And none are left to hear it. But still I scream. The shriek of Shiva the Destroyer, true face of Vishnu the Preserver, and Brahma the Creator. For my scream is not of life or death, but of life in death. And I am equally contemptuous of Perry, and of august personage, of squirrels, and of men, and of all lesser birds, who cannot ascend to my height, and know the agony and supremacy of my freedom.
No, because they broke Billy Frechette slow and ugly, and they broke Marilyn Monroe fast and bright like lightning. They broke Daddy and they broke Mama. But shit, like I mean it this time, they ain't going to break me. No, even if it's greater with Simon than with any other man, even if he knows more than any other man I've had. No. It can't be him, and it can't even be Hagbard, who seems to be the king of the circus, the very ringmaster and keeper of the final secret. No, it can't be any man, and it most certainly by Jesus and by Christ it can't be going back to Mr. Charlie's police force. No, it's dark like my own skin, and dark like the destiny they've inflicted on me because of my skin. But whatever it is, I can only find it alone. God, the time that rat bit me while I was sleeping. Daddy screaming until he was almost crying. I'll kill the fucking landlord. I'll kill the motherfucker. I'll cut his white heart out. Until Mama finally calmed him. No, he died a little then. No, it would have been better if he had killed the landlord. No, even if they caught him, and they would have caught him. No, even if he died in the goddamn electric chair and went on welfare. No, a man shouldn't let that happen to his children. He shouldn't be realistic and practical. No, no matter how good it is, no matter how wonderful the come, it will always be there in the back of my head that Simon is white. No white, radical, white, revolutionary white lover, it doesn't matter. It still comes up white, and it's not acid, and it's not a mood. I mean shit. You have to decide sooner or later, are you on somebody else's trip or are you on your own? No, and I can't join God's lightning or even what's left of the old women's lib. I mean shit, that poetry Simon quoted is all wrong. No, it's not true that no man is an island. No, the truth is, every man is an island, and especially every woman is an island. And even more, every black woman is an island.
On August 23, 1928, Rancid, the butler in the Drake mansion on Old Beacon Hill, reported a rather distressing fact to his employer.
Good Lord, Harry!
Old Drake cried at first.
Is he turning papist now?
His second question was less rhetorical.
You're absolutely sure?
There is no doubt,
Rancid replied.
The maids showed me the socks, sir, and the shoes.
That night there was a rather strangulated attempt at conversation in the mansion's old library.
Are you going back to Harvard?
Not yet.
Are you at least going to try another damned alienist?
They call themselves psychiatrists these days, Father. I don't think so.
Damn it, Robert, what did happen in the war?
Many things. They all made profits for our bank, though, so don't worry about them.
Are you turning red?
I see no profit there. The state of Massachusetts killed 2 innocent men today for holding opinions of that sort.
Innocent my Aunt Fanny. Robert, I know the judge personally.
And he believes what the friend of a banker should believe.
There was a long pause, and old Drake crushed out a cigar he had hardly started.
Robert, you know you're sick.
Yes.
What is this latest thing? Glass and nails in your shoes. Your mother would die if she knew.
There was another silence. Robert Putney Drake finally answered, languidly.
It was an experiment, a phase. The Sioux Indians do much worse themselves in the Sundance. So do lots of chaps in Spanish monasteries and in India, among other places. It's not the answer.
It's really finished?
Oh, yes, quite. I'm trying something else.
Something to hurt yourself again?
No, nothing to hurt myself.
Well, then, I'm glad to hear that. But I do wish you would go to another alienist or psychiatrist or whatever they call themselves.
Another pause.
You can pull yourself together, you know. Play the man, Robert. Play the man.
Old Drake was satisfied. He had talked turkey to the boy. He had performed his fatherly duty. Besides, the private detectives assured him that the Red business really was trivial. The lad had been to several anarchist and communist meetings, but his comments had been uniformly aloof and cynical. It was nearly a year later when the really bad news from the private investigators arrived.
How much will the girl take to keep her mouth shut?
Old Drake asked immediately.
After we pay hospital expenses, maybe 1,000 more,
the man from Pinkerton said.
Offer her 500,
the old man replied.
Go up to 1,000 only if you have to.
I said maybe 1,000,
the detective said bluntly.
He used a special kind of whip, one with twisted nails in the ends. She may want 2,000 or 3,000.
She's only a common whore. They're used to this sort of thing.
Not to this extent.
The detective was losing his deferential tone.
The photos of her back, and her buttocks especially, didn't bother me much, but that's because I'm in this business and I've seen a lot. An average jury would vomit, Mr. Drake. In court.
In court?
Old Drake pronounced.
She would come before a judge who belongs to several of my clubs and has investments in my bank. Offer 500.
2 months thereafter, the stock market crashed and New York millionaires began leaping from high windows onto hard streets. Old Drake, the next day, ran into his son begging on the street near the old granary cemetery. The boy was wearing old clothes from a second-hand store.
It's not that bad, son. We'll pull through.
Oh, I know that. You'll come out ahead, in fact, if I'm any judge of character.
Then what the hell is this disgraceful, damned foolishness?
Experience. I'm breaking out of a trap.
The old man fumed all the way back to the bank. That evening, he decided it was time for another open and honest discussion. When he went to Robert's room, however, he found the boy thoroughly trussed up in chains and quite purple in the face.
God damn, son! What is this?
The boy, who was 27 and in some respects more sophisticated than his father, grinned and relaxed. The purple faded from his face.
One of Houdini's escapes,
he explained simply.
You intend to become a stage magician? My God!
Not at all. I'm breaking out of another trap, the one that says nobody but Houdini can do these things.
Old Drake, to do him justice, hadn't acquired his wealth without some shrewdness concerning human peculiarities.
I begin to see,
he said heavily.
Pain is a trap. That was why you put the broken glass in your shoes that time. Fear of poverty is a trap. That's why you tried begging on the streets. You're trying to become a Superman, like those crazy boys in Chicago, the thrill killers. What you did to that whore last year was part of all this. What else have you done?
A lot.
Robert shrugged.
Enough to be canonized as a saint or to be burnt as a diabolist. None of it seems to add up, though. I still haven't found the way.
He suddenly made a new effort, and the chain slipped to the floor.
Simple yoga and muscle control,
he said without pride.
The chains in the mind are much harder. I wish there were a chemical, a key to the nervous system.
Robert,
said old Drake,
you are going back to an alienist. I'll have you committed if you won't go voluntarily.
And so Dr. Faustus Unbewusst acquired a new patient, at a time when many of his most profitable cases were discontinuing therapy because of the monetary depression. He made very few notes on Robert, but these were subsequently found by an Illuminati operative, photostated, and placed in the archives at Hagbard, where Hagbard AA read them in 1965. They were undated, and scrawled in a hurried hand. Dr. Unbewusst, in reaction formation against his own anal component, was a conspicuously untidy and careless person, but they told a fairly straightforward story.
RPG, age 27, latent homo. Father rich as Croesus. 5 sessions per week at $50 each, $250. Keep him in therapy 5 years, that's a clear $65,000. Be ambitious. Aim for 10 years, $130,000. Beautiful. RPD, not latent homo at all. Advanced psychopath. Moral imbecile. Actually enjoys the money I'm soaking his father. Hopeless case. All drives ecosyntonic. Bastard doesn't give a fuck. Maybe as long as 12 years. $156,000. Hot shit. RPD back on sadism again. Thinks that's the key. Must use great care. If he gets caught at something serious, jail or a sanatorium, and can kiss that $156,000 goodbye. Maybe use drugs to calm him. RPD in another schizo mood today, full of some crap a gypsy fortune-teller told him. Extreme care needed. If the occultists get him, that's 13 grand per year out the window. Clue to RPD. All goes back to the war. Can't stand the thought that all must die. Metaphysical hang-up. Nothing I can do. If only there were an immortality pill. The risk of losing him to the occultists or even a church worse than I feared. I can feel the 13 grand slipping away. RPD wants to go to Europe. Wants a meeting, maybe therapy with that scheissdreck Dummkopf Carl Jung. Must have warned parents too sick to travel. RPD gone after only 10 months. A lousy 11 grand case. Too angry to see patients today. Spent morning drafting letter to Globe on why fortune-tellers should be forbidden by law. If I could get my hands on that woman, on her fat throat, the bitch, the fat stinking ignorant bitch, $156,000 down the drain. Because he needs immortality and doesn't know how to get it.
In Ingolstadt, Danny Price Fixer and Clark Kent are still staring at each other over Lady Velcor's sleeping body when Atlanta Hope bursts into the room, fresh from a shower, and throws herself on the bed, hugging and kissing everybody.
"It was the first time,"
she cries.
"the first time I ever really made it. It took all three of you."
On the other side of Kent, Lady Velcor opens an eye and says,
"Don't I get any credit? It takes 5 that way, remember?"
Mama Sutra was only 30 then, but she streaked her hair with gray to fit the image of the wise woman. She recognized Drake as soon as he wandered into the tea parlor, old Drake's son, the crazy one, loaded. He motioned to her before the waitress could take his order. Mama Sutra, quick to pick up clues, could tell from his suit's wrinkles that he had been lying down. Boston Common is a long walk from Beacon Hill. There were shrinks in the neighborhood. Ergo, he hadn't come from home, but from a therapy session.
Tea leaves or cards?
She asked courteously, sitting across from him at the table.
Cards?
He said absently, looking down from the window to the common.
Coffee,
he added to the waitress.
Black as sin.
Were you listening to the preachers down there?
Mama Sutra asked shrewdly.
Yes.
He grinned engagingly.
He that believeth shall never taste death. They're in rare form today.
Shuffle,
she said, handing the cards over.
But they awakened some spiritual need in you, my son. That's why you came up here.
He met her eye cynically.
I'm willing to try any kind of witchcraft once. I just came from a practitioner of the latest variety just off the boat from Vienna a few years.
Bullseye, she thought.
Neither his science nor their unenlightened faith can help you,
Mama said somberly, ignoring his cynicism.
Let us hope that the cards will show the way.
She dealt a traditional tree of life. At the crown was death upside down, and below it were the King of Swords in Chokma and the Knight of Wands in Bina.
He that believeth shall never taste death,
he had quoted cynically.
I see a battlefield,
she began. It was common Boston gossip that Drake first started acting odd after the war.
I see death come very close to you and then miss you.
She pointed to the reverse death card with a dramatic finger.
But many died. Many that you cared for deeply.
I liked a few of them,
he said grudgingly.
Mostly I was worried about my own ass. My own hide. But go ahead.
She looked at the Knight of Wands in the Bina position. Should she mention the bisexuality implied? He was going to a shrink and might be able to take it. Mama tried to hold the Knight of Wands and King of Swords together in her focus, and the way became clear.
There are 2 men in you. One loves other men, perhaps too much. The other is desperately trying to free himself from all of humanity, even from the world. You're a Leo,
she added suddenly, taking a leap.
Yes,
he said, unimpressed.
August 6th.
He was thinking that she had probably looked up the birth dates of all the richer individuals in town in case they ever wandered in.
It's very hard for Leos to accept death,
she said sadly.
You are like Buddha after he saw the corpse on the road. No matter what you have or own, no matter what you achieve, it will never be enough, for you saw too many corpses in the war. Ah, my son, would that I could help you. But I only read cards. I am no alchemist who sells the elixir of eternal life.
While he was digesting that one, a sure hit she felt, Mama rushed on to examine the 5 of wands reversed in chesed and the magus upright in gebura.
So many wands,
she said.
So many fire signs. A true Leo, but so much of it turned inward. See how the energetic Knight of Wands descends to the 5, upside down? All your energies, and Leos are very powerful, are turned against yourself. You are a burning man, trying to consume yourself and be reborn. And the Magus, who shows the way, is below the King of Swords and dominated by him. Your reason won't allow you to accept the necessity of the fire. You are still rebelling against death.
The fool was in Tippereth and surprisingly upright.
But you are very close to taking the final step. You are ready to let the fire consume even your intellect and die to this world.
This was going swimmingly, she thought. And then she saw the devil in Netzach and the 9 of swords reversed in Yod. The rest of the tree was even worse. The tower in Yesod and the lovers reversed.
Of course.
In Malkuth. Not a cup or a pentacle anywhere.
You're going to emerge as a much stronger man,
she said weakly.
That isn't what you see,
Drake said.
And it isn't what I see. The devil and the tower together are a pretty destructive pair, aren't they?
I suppose you know what the lovers reversed means, too,
she asked.
The answer of the oracle is always death,
he quoted.
But you won't accept it.
The only way to conquer death until science produces an immortality pill is to make him your servant, your company cop,
Drake said calmly.
That's the key I've been looking for. The bartender never becomes an alcoholic, and the high priest laughs at the gods. Besides, the tower is rotten to the core and deserves to be destroyed.
He pointed abruptly to the fool.
You have some real talents, obviously, even if you do cheat like everybody in this racket, and you must know there are 2 choices after crossing the abyss. The right-hand path and the left-hand path. I seem to be headed for the left-hand path. I can see that much, and it confirms what I already suspect. Go ahead and tell me the rest of what you see. I'm not afraid to hear it.
Very well.
Mama wondered if he was one of the few, the very few, who would eventually come to the attention of the Shining Ones.
You will make death your servant, as a tactic to master him. Yours is, indeed, the left-hand path. You will cause immense suffering, especially to yourself at first, but after a while you won't notice that. After a while, you won't even notice the horrors that you inflict on others. Men will say that you are a materialist, a worshipper of money. What do you hate most?
She asked abruptly.
Sentimental slop and lies. All the Christian lies in Sunday school, all the democratic lies in the newspapers, all the socialist lies our so-called intellectuals are spouting these days. Every rotten, crooked, sneaking, hypocritical deception people use to hide from themselves, that we're all still hunting animals in a jungle.
You admire Nietzsche.
He was crazy. Let's just say I have less contempt for him and for Descartes than I have for most intellectuals.
Yes. So we know what the tower is that you will destroy. Everything in America that smacks of democracy or Christianity or socialism. The whole facade of humanitarianism from the Constitution onward to the present. You will turn your fire loose and burn all that up with your leonine energies. You will force your view of America into total reality, and make every citizen afraid of the jungle and of the death that lurks in the jungle. Crime and commerce are moving closer together due to prohibition. You will complete their marriage. All this, just to make death your servant instead of your master. The money and power are just incidental to that.
No, because even if you think you have it beat, even if you think you can work out a reconciliation, a separate peace, shit, the war still goes on. No, you're only kidding yourself. Even say I love Simon, and that's all Hollywood bullshit. You can't really tell in only 1 week, no matter how good it is. But even if I love Simon, the war goes on as long as we're going around in separate skins. White man, black man, bronze man, white woman, black woman, bronze woman. Even if Hagbard claims to have gotten past all that on his submarine, it's only because they're under the water and away from the world. Out here, the bastards are using live ammunition, like it says in the old joke. Maybe that's the only truth in the world, not the Bibles, or poetry, or philosophy, but just the old jokes, especially the bad jokes and the sad jokes. No, they're using live ammunition. Shit. They never see me, all of them. White man, black man, bronze man, white woman, black woman, bronze woman. They look at me and I'm in their game. I have my role. I am black woman. I am never just me. No, it goes on and on. Every step upward is a step into more hypocrisy, until the game is stopped completely. And nobody has found out how to do that. No, the more Simon says that he does see me, the more he's lying to himself. No, he never makes it with white woman because she's too much like his mother or some damn Freudian reason like that. Shit. No, I can't go on in their game. I am going to scream with rage. I am going to scream like an eagle. I am going to scream in the ears of the whole world until somebody does see me, until I am not black woman, and not black, and not woman, and nothing. No, nothing. Just me. No, they'll say I'm giving up love and sanity. Well, fuck them all. No, I won't turn back. The acid has changed everything. No, at the end of it, when I really am me, maybe then I can find a better love and a better sanity. No, but first, I have to find me.
Go on.
Drake was unsmiling but undisturbed.
The King of Swords and the Knight of Wands are both very active. You could do all this harmlessly by becoming an artist and showing this vision of the jungle. You don't have to create it literally and inflict it on your fellow human beings.
Stop preaching. Just read the cards. You're better at it than I am, but I can see enough to know that there is no such alternative for me. The other wand and the other sword are reversed. I can't be satisfied to do it in symbolic form. I must do it so that everybody is affected by it, not just the few who read books or go to concerts. Tell me what I don't know. Why is the line from the Fool to the Tower completed in the Lovers reversed? I know that I can't love anyone, and I don't believe that anybody else ever does either. That's more sentiment than hypocrisy. People use each other as masturbating machines and crying towels, and they call it love. But there's a deeper meaning. What is it?
Start from the top. Death reversed. You reject death, so the fool cannot undergo rebirth and enter the right-hand path when he crosses the abyss. Therefore, the left-hand path, the destruction of the tower. There's only one end to that chain of karma, my son. The Lovers means death, just as death means life. You are rejecting natural death, and therefore refusing natural life. Your path will be an unnatural life, leading to a death that is against nature. You will die as a man before your body dies. The fire is still self-destructive. Even if you turn it outward and use the whole world as a stage for your private Götterdämmerung. Your primary victim will still be yourself.
You have the talent,
Drake said coldly.
But you are still basically a fraud like everyone else in this business. Your worst victim, madam, is yourself. You deceive yourself with the lies that you have so often told others. It's the occupational disease of mystics. The truth is that it doesn't matter whether I destroy myself alone or destroy this planet or turn around and try to find my way to the right-hand path in some dreary monastery. The universe will roll blindly along, not caring, not even knowing. There's no granddaddy in the clouds to pass a last judgment. There's only a few airplanes up there learning more and more about how to carry bombs. They court-martial General Mitchell for saying it, but it's the truth. The next time around, they'll really bomb the hell out of civilian populations. And the universe won't know or care about that either. Don't tell me that my flight from death leads back to death. I'm not a child, and I know that all paths lead back to death eventually. The only question is, do you cower before him all your life, or do you spit in his eye?
You can transcend abject fear and rebellious hatred both. You can see that he is only part of the great wheel, and like all other parts, necessary to the whole. Then you can accept him.
Next, you'll be telling me to love him.
That too.
Yes, and I can learn to see the great and glorious whole picture. I can see all the men defecating and urinating in their trousers before they died at Chateau Thierry, watching their own guts fall out into their laps and screaming out of a hole that isn't even a mouth anymore, as manifestations of that sublime harmony and balance which is ineffable and holy and beyond all speech and reason. Sure, I can see that. If I knock half of my brain out of commission and hypnotize myself into thinking that the view from that weird perspective is deeper and wider and more truly true than the view from an unclouded mind. Go to the quadruple amputee ward and try to tell them that. You speak of death as a personified being. Very well. Then I must regard him as any other entity that gets in my way. Love is a myth invented by poets and other people who couldn't face the world and crept off into corners to create fantasies to console themselves. The fact is that when you meet another entity, either it makes way for you or you make way for it. Either it dominates and you submit, or you dominate and it submits. Take me into any club in Boston, and I'll tell you which millionaire has the most millions by the way the others treat him. Take me into any working man's bar, and I'll tell you who has the best punch in a fistfight by the way the others treat him. Take me into any house, and I'll tell you in a minute whether the husband or the wife is dominant. Love, equality, reconciliation, acceptance, those are the excuses of the losers to persuade themselves that they choose their condition and weren't beaten down into it. Find a dutiful wife who truly loves her husband. I'll have her in my bed in 3 days maximum. Because I'm so damned attractive. No, because I understand men and women. I'll make her understand, without saying it aloud and shocking her, that the adultery will, one way or another, hurt her husband, whether he knows about it or not. Show me the most servile colored waiter in the best restaurant in town, and after he's through explaining Christianity and humility and all the rest of it, count how many times a day he steps into the kitchen to spit into his handkerchief. The other employees will tell you he has a chest condition. The condition he has is chronic rage. The mother and the child, an endless power struggle. Listen to the infant's cry change in pitch when the mother doesn't come at once. Is that fear you hear? It's rage, insane fury at not having total dominance. As for the mother herself, I'd wager that 90% of the married women in the psychiatrist's care are there because they can't admit to themselves, can't escape the lie of love long enough to admit to themselves how often they want to strangle that monster in the nursery. Love of country? Another lie. The truth is fear of cops and prisons. Love of art? Another lie. The truth is fear of the naked truth without ornaments and false faces on it. Love of truth itself. The biggest lie of all. Fear of the unknown. people learn acceptance of all this and achieve wisdom, they surrender to superior force and call their cowardice maturity. It still comes down to one question. Are you kneeling at the altar, or are you on the altar watching the others kneel to you?
The wheel of the tarot is the wheel of Dharma.
Mama Sutra said softly when he had concluded.
It is also the wheel of the galaxy, which you see as a blind machine. It rolls on, as you say, no matter what we think or do. Knowing that, I accept death as part of the wheel, and I accept your non-acceptance as another part. I can control neither. I can only repeat my warning, which is not a lie, but a fact about the structure of the wheel. By denying death, you guarantee that you will meet him finally in his most hideous form.
Drake finished his coffee and smiled whimsically.
You know,
he said,
my contempt for lies has an element of the very sentimentality and foolish idealism that I have been rejecting. Perhaps I will be most effective if I never speak so honestly again. When you hear of me next, I might be known as a philanthropist and benefactor of mankind.
He lit a cigar thoughtfully.
And that would even be true if your tarot mysticism is correct after all. If death is necessary to the wheel, along with all the other parts, then I am necessary also. The wheel would collapse, perhaps, if my spirit of rebellion were not there to balance your spirit of acceptance. Imagine that.
It is true. That is why I have warned you, but not judged you.
So I am, as Goethe says, part of that force which aims at evil and only achieves good.
That is a thought which you should try to remember when the dark night of Samael descends upon you at the end.
More can't,
Drake said, with a return to his previous cynicism.
I aim at evil, and I will achieve evil. The wheel and all its harmonious balances and all healing paradoxes is just another myth of the weak and defeated. One strong man can stop the wheel or tear it to shreds if he dares enough.
Perhaps. We who study the wheel do not know all of its secrets. Some believe that your spirit reappears constantly in history, because it is fated eventually to triumph. Maybe this is the last century of terrestrial mortals, and the next century will be the time of the cosmic immortals. What will happen then? When the wheel is stopped, none of us can predict. It may be your good or evil or even, to quote your favorite philosopher, beyond good and evil. We cannot say. That is another reason I do not judge you.
Listen,
Drake said with sudden emotion.
We're both lying. It's not all this philosophical or cosmic. The simple fact is that I couldn't sleep nights, and nothing I tried in conventional cures would help me until I began to help myself by systematically rebelling against everything that seemed stronger than me.
I know. I didn't know it was insomnia. It might have been nightmares or dizzy spells or sexual impotence. But there was some way that the scenes you saw in Chateau Thierry lived on and goaded you to wake out of the dream of the sleepwalkers on the streets. You are waking. You stand on the abyss.
She pointed to the fool and the dog who barks at his heels.
And I am the noisy little bitch barking to warn you that you can still choose the right-hand path. The decision is not final until you cross the abyss.
But the cards show that I really have very little choice, especially in the world that is going to emerge from this depression.
Mama Sutra smiled without forgiveness or final condemnation.
This is no age for saints,
she agreed softly.
$2, please.
George, don't make no bull moves!
The Dutchman saw it all clearly now. Capone and Luciano and Maldonado and Lepke and all the rest of them were afraid of Winifred and the Washington crowd. They were planning a deal, and his death was part of the bargain. The fools didn't know that you can never negotiate from fear. They thought of the order only as a handy gimmick for international communications and illicit trade. They were too dumb to really study the teachings. Especially, they had never understood the third teaching, fear is failure. Once you're afraid of the bulls, you're lost. But the bull was gone.
What have you done with them?
He shouted at the hospital wall. Smiling Jim had seen the eagle only the day before. Its nest was definitely on one of these peaks. He would get it. He knew it in his bones, a hunch so strong it couldn't be doubted. Panting, sweating, every muscle aching, he climbed onward. The coffee leaped out of the paper cup and slurped onto the pages of Carnal Orgy. Igor Beaver, the graduate student, looked up in astonishment. The seismograph stood at grade 5. A mile away, Dillinger woke as the bedroom door slammed shut and his favorite statue, King Kong atop the Empire State Building, fell off the bureau.
No remission, no remission, no remission without the shedding of blood. No remission without the shedding of blood.
Mama Sutra looked down through the window at Boston Common. Robert Putney Drake had stopped and was listening to one of the preachers again. Even at this distance, she could recognize the cool, closed smile on his face. The Dalai Lama sat down across from her.
Well?
He asked.
Definitely. The Order will have to intervene.
Mama shook her head sadly.
He's a menace to the whole world.
Slowness is beauty,
the Dalai Lama said.
Let the lower order contact him first. If they decide he's worth the effort, then we'll act. I think I shall persuade Hagbard to attend Harvard, so he can be in his neighborhood and keep an eye on him, so to speak.
It's the Word of the Bible and the Word of God, and it says it plain and clear, so no highbrow professor can say it means something else.
How old are you actually?
Mama asked curiously. The Dalai Lama looked at her levelly.
Would you believe 30,000 years?
She laughed.
I should have known better than to ask. You can always tell the higher members by their sense of humor.
And this is what it says. No remission! No remission, brothers and sisters! No remission without the shedding of blood! Without the shedding of blood! No remission! No remission without the shedding of blood!
Hagbard's mouth fell open in completely genuine surprise.
Well, sink me,
he said, beginning to laugh. Behind him on a wall, Joe noticed dizzily, was a brand-new graffito, probably scrawled by someone out of his skull on the acid. The pigeons in B.F. Skinner's cages are political prisoners.
We both pass,
Hagbard went on happily.
We've been judged and found innocent by the great god Acid.
Joe took a deep breath.
And when do you start to explain in monosyllables or sign language or semaphore or something a non-illuminated moron like me can understand?
You read all the clues. It was right out in the open. It was plain as a barn door. It was as conspicuous as my nose and twice as homely in every sense of that word.
Hagbard, for Christ's sake, and for my sake and for all our sakes, will you stop gloating and give me the answer?
I'm sorry.
Hagbard pocketed the gun carelessly.
I'm a bit giddy. I've been waging a kind of war all night, high on acid. It was a strain, especially since I was at least 90% sure you'd kill me before it was over.
He lit one of his abominable cigars.
Briefly, then, the Illuminati is benevolent, compassionate, kindly, generous, etc., etc. Add all the other complimentary adjectives you can think of. In short, we're the good guys.
But it can't be.
It can be, and it is.
Hagbard motioned him toward the Bugatti.
Let's sit down, if I may permit myself one more acrostic before the codes and puzzles are all resolved.
They climbed into the front seat, and Joe accepted the brandy decanter Hagbard offered.
Of course,
Hagbard went on,
when I say good, you've got to understand that all terms are relative. We're as good as is possible in this fucked-up section of the galaxy. We're not perfect. Certainly I'm not, and I haven't observed anything approaching immaculate perfection in any of the other masters of the temple either. But we are, in human terms and by ordinary standards, decent chaps. There's a reason for that. It's the basic law of magic, and it's in every textbook. You must have read it somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Joe took a stiff snort of the brandy. It was peach, his favorite.
Yes, I think. As ye give, so shall ye get.
Precisely.
Hagbard took back the bottle and had a snort himself.
Mind you, Joe, that's a scientific law, not a moral commandment. There are no commandments because there is no commander anywhere. All authority is a delusion, whether in theology or in sociology. Everything is radically, even sickeningly, free. The first law of magic is as neutral as Newton's first law of motion. It says that the equation balances, and that's all it says. You are still free to give evil and pain if you decide you must. Once done, however, you never escape the consequences. It always comes back. No prayers, sacrifices, mortifications, or supplications will change it any more than they'll change Newton's laws or Einstein's. So we're good, as moralists would say, because we know enough to have a bloody strong reason to be good. In the last week, things went too fast and I became evil. I deliberately ordered and paid for the deaths of various people and set in motion processes that have led to still other deaths. I knew what I was doing, and I knew, and still know, that I'll pay for it. Such decisions are extremely rare in the history of the Order, and my superior, the Dalai Lama, tried to persuade me it was unnecessary this time, too. I disagreed. I take the responsibility. No man, a god, a goddess can change it. I will pay, and I'm ready to pay whenever and however the bill is presented.
Hagbard, what are you?
A mehume, the Saure family would say.
Hagbard grinned.
A mere human, no more, not one jot more.
How much blood?
Robert Putney Drake asked. He was astonished at his own words. In all his experiments at breaking through the walls, he had never lowered himself to heckling an ignorant street preacher.
All the blood in the world isn't enough. Every man, woman, and child isn't enough. Even all the animals, if you added them in line in some pagan or voodoo sacrifice, it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough, brothers. The good book says so.
There were 5 of us.
John Dillinger was explaining to George as they trudged back toward Ingolstadt, having lost Hagbard and the Bugatti in the crowd.
My folks kept it a secret. German people, very superstitious and secretive. They didn't want reporters all over the place and headlines about the first quintuplets to live. The Dion family got all that much later.
Because all the blood in the world isn't equal to 1 drop. Not 1 drop!
John Herbert Dillinger is in Las Vegas trying to track down the plague, unless he's already finished up and went home to Los Angeles.
John smiled.
He was always the brains of the bunch, runs a rock music company, real professional businessman. He was the oldest, by a couple of minutes, and we all sort of look up to him. He served the prison time, even though I'm the one who rightly should have, seen that robbing that grocer was my dumb idea. But he said he could take it without cracking up, and he was right.
Not 1 drop of the precious blood of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
I see,
Drake said.
And was that A-B-A-B or O?
John Hoover Dillinger lives in Mad Dog under the name D.J. Hoover. He's not above letting people suspect he's a distant relative of J. Edgar's. Mostly,
John said,
he's retired, except occasionally for little jobs like helping arrange convincing jailbreaks, say, when Jim Cartwright wants to let a prisoner get out in a realistic fashion. He gave Naismith the idea for the John Dillinger Died for You Society.
How about the other 2?
George asked. thinking that it would be even harder to decide whether he loved Stella more than Mavis, or Mavis more than Stella, now that he knew they were the same person. He wondered how Joe felt, since he obviously dug Miss Mao Sushi, and she was that person also. 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, like Dillinger. Or was Dillinger 5 in 3? George realized suddenly that he was still tripping a little. Dillinger was 5 in 1, not 5 in 3. The law of fives again. Did that mean there were 2 more in the Mavis-Stella-Mao complex? 2 that he hadn't met yet? Why did 2 and 3 keep popping up in all this?
The other 2 are dead,
John said sadly.
John Edgar Dillinger was born first, and he went and died first. Fast and furious he was. It was him that plugged that bank guard in East Chicago while the rest of us were vacationing and laying low in Miami. Always the hothead he was. Had a heart attack back in '43 and went to an early grave. John Thomas Dillinger went in '69. He was in Chicago in '68 on a jam assignment, meeting with a crazy English spy named Chips. British intelligence somehow got a report that the Democratic Convention was being run by the Bavarian Illuminati and would end with an assassination. They didn't believe in the Illuminati, so they sent Chips. They always send him on wild cases because he's nutty enough to take them seriously and do a thorough job. Both of them got tear gas coming out of the Hilton Hotel, and poor Chips got thrown in a paddy wagon with a bunch of young radicals. John Thomas had a chest problem already, a chronic asthma, and the tear gas made it a lot worse. He went from doctor to doctor and finally passed away in early '69. So there's a cop in Chicago who could boast that he really killed John Dillinger, only he doesn't know it. Isn't life peculiar?
The Saure family only thought they were in the Illuminati.
Hagbard went on.
Hitler and Stalin only thought they were in the Illuminati. Old Weishaupt only thought he was in the Illuminati. It's that simple. The moral of the whole story is, beware of cheap Occidental imitations.
He smiled grimly.
I think it's beginning to penetrate,
Joe said slowly.
It was, of course, the very first hypothesis I formed. There have been many groups in history who called themselves the Illuminati, and they weren't all aiming at exactly the same thing.
Precisely.
Hagbard puffed again at his cigar.
That's the natural first suspicion of any non-paranoid mind. Then, as you explore the evidence, links between these groups begin to appear. Eventually, the paranoid hypothesis begins to appear more plausible, and you begin to believe there always has been one Illuminati, using the same basic slogans and symbols and aiming at the same basic goal. I sent Jim Cartwright to you with that yarn about 3 conspiracies, the ABC, or Ancient Bavarian Conspiracy, the NBC, or New Bavarian Conspiracy, and the CBS, or Conservative Bavarian Seers, to set you thinking that the truth might be midway backward toward the simple first idea. From here on in, forget that I represent the original Illuminati. In fact, in recent centuries, we don't use a name at all. We employ only the initials AA, written like this.
He sketched on a Donau Hotel matchbook. A.
A lot of occult writers,
he went on,
have made some amazing guesses as to what that means. Actually, it doesn't mean a damn thing. To prevent our name from being stolen and misused again, we don't have a name. Anybody who thinks he's guessed the name and tries to pass himself off as an initiate by declaring that we're really the Atlantean Arcanum or the Argentium Astrum or whatever, immediately reveals that he's a fraud. It's a neat gimmick. I only wish we'd thought of it centuries earlier.
The buzzer on the president's secretary's desk buzzed as Saul and Barney passed through the outer door. The secretary flipped the switch, and the president said,
"Found out the highest medal a civilian can get in order 2 on my signature for those 2 detectives."
Yes, sir.
The secretary said, scribbling.
"And then ask the FBI to check out that older one. He looked like a kike to me."
The president said shrewdly.
No, because I'd be a fool to think miracles can occur in this world before somebody pays the rent and the taxes and shows that their papers are in order. And the people who are running it can always tell you your papers are not in order. No, because there are no magicians, and even Hagbard is mostly a fraud and a con man, even if he means well. No, because I'm not Pope Joan if there ever was a Pope Joan. No, because like the song says, I'm not a queen, I'm a woman, and the wrong color woman to boot. No, because there will be rivers of blood, and the earth will be shaken before we can overturn Boss Charlie, because it isn't a simple one-night symbolic Armageddon like Hagbard fooled all them into thinking. No, because Hagbard is some kind of magician and put us all on his own trip for a while. But the real world isn't a trip, it's a bummer. No, because the lovers don't live happily ever after. What happens is that they get married and get into debt and live slavery ever after. And I've got to find something better than that. No, because none of us are driving the car. It's the car that's driving us. No, because it's like that old joke. Balls, said the queen. If I had them, I'd be king. And nuts, said the prince. I've got them, and I'm not king. And crap, said the king, and 30,000 royal subjects squatted and strained, for in those days the king's word was law. Hagbard would call it anality and sexism and ageism, but it just comes down to the women and children getting all the crap right in the face, and a few males owning everything. The truth is all in the old jokes, especially the bad jokes. And I'm still tripping, but this is true. They can always say your papers are not in order. No, because sometimes you've got to be a hermit and then come back later when you're together. No, because the wheel keeps spinning and doesn't give a fuck if there's going to be any change. It's got to be that some human being somewhere does give a fuck. No, because I've never found a way to shut Simon's mouth and make him listen. No, because Jesus Christ was a black man, and they've even lied about that. He was another black man they killed, and they won't admit it. No, because death is the currency in every empire, Roman or American, or any other. All empires are the same. Death is always the argument they use. No, because the whole world can go to the devil, and I'm taking care of Mary Lou. No, because look at that professor they killed at the UN building, and none of them arrested yet. No, because there's a perpetual motion machine inside me, and I'm learning to let it run. No, because I'll put a curse on all of them. I'll burn them. I'll condemn them. I'll have the world. No, because look what happened to Daddy and Mommy.